response to an unprecedented financial crisis and a deep and widespread global recession. Allowing borrowing to rise, protecting services, helping people and businesses is the right thing to do. The alternative, to take money out of the economy now, as some have suggested, would damage key public services, it would create more unemployment, it would lengthen the downturn and lead in the end to higher, not lower, debt. This government, as well as others, have learnt from the historic economic mistakes of the interwar period that countries cannot deflate their way out of recession. Mr. Deputy Speaker, taken together, my budget measures today represent a fiscal easing of 0.5% of GDP this year, followed by a tightening of 0.8% of GDP each year until 2013-14. I believe this is a sensible pathway to sustainable public finances. It will mean, as I said, the budget deficit will be halved in the next 4 years. But at this stage, when there is so much uncertainty, to do so quicker would prevent us helping people now. It would, I believe, choke off recovery and stop us investing in the future. Now, many countries, as a result of their action to support the economy, have seen higher deficits. In the United States, for example, their Congressional Budget Office expects their deficit to be 13% of GDP in 2009, 10% in 2010, and even in 2019, the deficit will be above 5%. Our own figures for public sector net borrowing will be £175 billion this year, or some 12% of GDP. From 2010, as the economy starts to recover and the measures announced in November and today take effect, borrowing will fall to £173 billion, then 140, 118 and then £97 billion. And as a share of GDP, our borrowing will be 11.9% GDP next year, and then as we move towards balance, 9.1% in 2011-12, then 7.2%, then 5.5% in 2013-14. Mr. Deputy Speaker, this downturn will inevitably mean sharp increases in national debt relative to GDP. UK net debt, which includes the cost of stabilising the banking system, will, as a share of GDP, increase from 59% this year to 68% next, then 74% in 2011-12, 78% and then 79% in 2013-14. It will stabilise and then begin to fall from 2015-16. But in countries across the world, because of this economic crisis, it will take far longer for deficits to come back into balance. But because of the steps we are taking, I expect the underlying current budget to come back into balance 2 years later. Mr. Deputy Speaker, we need to help people now. We need to maintain key public services now. We need to invest in the future, but we also need to make sure that we maintain public finances on a sustainable footing. Indeed, this is the best way to drive up economic growth, which in turn is the best way to bring down borrowing and rebalance the public finances. But we must do this within a timescale that does not damage the recovery. Now, this will require tough decisions, but I'm determined they will be fair decisions. Mr. Deputy Speaker, it cannot be fair that those who should pay tax are allowed to avoid it. Over the last decade, we have taken a number of measures which have reduced tax evasion and avoidance, on average reducing avoidance by over £1 billion a year. And I intend to build on this today. We have identified loopholes and schemes which, when closed, will result in £1 billion of extra revenue over the next 3 years. Mr. Deputy Speaker, in this budget, there will be new measures to help pensioners and savers on middle and modest incomes. It is important that everyone is encouraged to save for their retirement, and we will continue to support them to do so. But I intend to address an anomaly which sees a tiny proportion at the top taking a large slice of the help we give people to help to save. Mr. Deputy Speaker, it is difficult to justify how a quarter of all the money the country spends on pensions tax relief goes as now to the top 1.5% of earners. So from April 2011, I will restrict the pension tax relief for those with incomes over £150,000, so that it is gradually tapered to the same 20% the majority of people receive. We will consult on its implementation, and I'm introducing measures from today to prevent forestalling. But again, only those with incomes over £150,000 will be affected. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I am not proposing to increase taxes on income this year. However, as the economy recovers and wages start to grow again, it's right that we take additional steps. I believe that it is fair that those who have gained the most should contribute more. Only those with incomes over £100,000 a year, or 2% of the population, will be affected. In November, I announced a new rate of income tax of 45% on incomes above £150,000. That's the top 1% of taxpayers. In order to help pay for additional support for people now and to invest in the future, I've decided that the new rate will be 50% and will come in from April next year, a year earlier. In November, I also announced that I was reducing personal allowances from the very highest earners with incomes over £100,000. These allowances are worth twice as much as those of basic rate taxpayers, and I've now decided to fully withdraw the benefit of that allowance for those with incomes over £100,000 from next April. Mr. Deputy Speaker, these measures are necessary to build our recovery and to secure our country's economic future. Along with other measures, including for landfill, company cars and gaming, I can also announce the following. I will continue to monitor oil prices, but I expect the fuel duty will increase by 2 pence per litre in September and then by 1 pence a litre above indexation each April for the next 4 years. Alcohol duties will go up by 2% from midnight tonight, and there will be an increase in tobacco duty of 2% from 6 o'clock this evening. Taken together, these measures will raise over £6 billion by 2012 to secure our economic future and to provide for help for people now when they need it most. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the importance of our public services on which we all depend becomes even clearer in these difficult times.